As the nation, we mourn the passing of a national elder, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And many names have been used to describe Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Prince, Prime Minister, political agitator, Zulu nationalist, you name them. Now, President of the Pan-African Psychology Union, a former political prisoner and leader of the Black Consciousness Movement, Professor Saths Cooper, has penned his memoirs on the late IFP founder, and we talk to him now via Zoom. Prof, good to have you with us this morning. You describe Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi as a complex personality. Break this down for us. An interesting use, an interesting choice of word there.
Well, he was very complex. He tended to be different things to different people. And we have a tradition amongst us of not speaking ill of the dead. However, our history of him and his history in the country is one that is quite singular. It's waxed and waned over time. And he ended up becoming an elder statesman, which he always wasn't, because he was a fierce critic of certain liberation organizations, while at the same time claiming membership and claiming that he had been enabled to participate in the KwaZulu Legislative Assembly. So you have somebody who many will record as being silent, even though his public utterances were anti-violent, remained silent when his followers performed dastardly acts of immense violence. I don't think there's many figures that have been involved in violence as he has. In the period from the early 80s right into the early 90s. He even threatened, he actually did pull out of the 1994 elections, and then almost on the eve of that election returned and put himself on the ballot. So there's a lot that will be written, has been written about him, and there's been from
and perhaps, Prof, at this point, when the news of his passing was announced, there were really mixed reactions. There were some who lauded him as the elderly statesman that we've gotten to know in the latter part of his life for his wisdom and being a mediator in many instances. And there were some who said, but we cannot forget the 1980s. We cannot forget what happened in the East Rand, Kokatlehong, which is where I grew up. We cannot forget what happened, Kobuipatong. We cannot forget the role that he played in, quote unquote, the massacre of so many South Africans. Talk to us, though, and what I'm quite interested in is that evolution from Ugaja Buthelezi, which is how we knew him in the 1980s, and that was the name that was used, to the Prime Minister, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, from a branding perspective and from an optics perspective.
Well, look, he was a master self-marketer because he claimed that he was the traditional prime minister of the Zulu people. That is disputed by historians. His father was the prime minister to King Cyprian, and he retained that position for two successive kingships in the kingdom of the Zulu. Now, whether the incumbents liked that or not is another story, but he was a very powerful personality and was able to create that narrative. So the media lapped it up and called him that. And in very many respects, he chose certain choice titles that he retained, and those titles will be unpacked.
I'd like to, Prof, in the limited time that we have, according to the records that I've been looking at, it was King Cyprian Zulu in 1954 who appointed him Undulankulu Gazulu. You are saying that's an area of contention?
Well, he was, yes, my apologies. He was appointed at that point, but the successor, King Zwelithini, found him and couldn't remove him. There were many testy relationships there. And the current king also, there's been testiness about that relationship. Be that as it may, he does claim royalty, which is correct, but there are very many other closenesses he's claimed. The closeness of Pixley Kasema to the family, he's claimed that. And he's also claimed relationships that he actually did have with ANC leaders over time. So nobody can get out of that. But he's weaved a story of his role was as a liberator because he had to play that role within the KwaZulu Legislative Assembly and defended that, saying the ANC in exile supported him in that quest. Now, a lot of that is up to speculation in many respects. We know he went to the TRC. He did apologize to Mandela for hurt he caused. However, he disacknowledged any involvement in his followers. You see, a leader accepts what his followers does. He does not deny that. And that, I think, has been something which will go down, which will be highly controversial. Many of us feel, well, we should forgive.
Unfortunately, Professor, a really engaging and interesting conversation, but time is not on our side. And we certainly will be continuing to unpack the legacy of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi.